We have finished adding and styling the Flash message component. In this video, we are going to work on adding and styling the featured post components. And this is not all about the components. It basically reveals a form when you click on the change button, and then updates when you click on the update button. So let's go to our index.html in the post folder in the admin section, and you find that we already added a form to represent the featured post form. Now we are going to add a label. It's going to be bold, as we see here, and to achieve a bold effect on text, we wrap it around the strong tag. Okay, and then after this, the next two components are going to be displayed conditionally. Now the two of them represent the title wrapper, which is what we see right now, and the input element itself, which is what you get when you click on the change button. Okay, so let us write some spans to represent them. We have the title wrapper, and then we have the input wrapper. Okay, for the input wrapper, we are going to have an input element. It will have a name of title. We are not going to define any ID for it. Rather, we will have some CSS classes, which include input control and input control small. Okay, let me break this to a new line so that it's easy to see. Okay, so another property we will add is the placeholder, which will simply say enter post title. Now the input wrapper is going to have the input element and a submit button. It's simply going to read update, and we'll also give it a class, a few classes, btn and btn primary. Okay, so as for the title wrapper, we will just have another span within it, which is going to hold the title of the post. Okay, and then it is also going to have a change button, but we need to make this simply a button, which means it doesn't need to be a submit button. We have to explicitly set the type to button, and it is going to read change. Now the reason I am setting this one to button is because we are defining the button within a form. And when you define a button within a form, by default, that button will have a type of submit. So if you click on that button, it will submit the contents of that form. But the functionality of this change button is not to submit. We only want to use JavaScript to reveal the form when the user clicks on this change button. So that's why we are setting it to button. Now it is this one that we want to actually submit the form, and that's why we are setting the type attribute to submit. As for the change button, we'll give it its own class of change featured post. Okay, so let us see how this looks on our page. Alright, so normally it's going to display both of them at the same time, but this is not what we want. Now we want to hide one of them. We want to hide the form initially, and then only reveal it when the user clicks on the change button. So let us do that. So when the page loads, we are going to hide the input wrapper. Remember, we did define a hide class in our admin file. Here. So we did define this class. So when we add it here, it will automatically hide the input wrapper, which as you can see is already working. Now we need to provide some padding at the top of this form to give some space between the featured post section and the span message, the flash message above it. Okay, so I will just copy the class on the featured post form. Then I'll scroll to the very bottom, just above the responsive boxes section, and I'll add a comment to signify featured post section. Okay, we will just give a padding at the top of 32 pixels and then 0 left and right. Alright, and this looks good. Now let us see what the input wrapper is going to look like. Let's remove the hide and transfer it onto the title wrapper so that we can see the input wrapper. Okay, you want to give it a bit of a width, so we are going to select it, input control small. So we'll make sure we first of all select the featured post form and then the input inside it. Let's give it a width of about 400 pixels. Refresh, and this looks better. Now we are not going to style the input right now, and we are not going to style even the button either. So we have already assigned some classes to these two elements, and these classes are very generic classes that we are going to define the CSS for all of them at one point in the future videos. So this featured post form is okay as it is. We just need to make sure that we make the change button to function, so that when you click on the change button, the text wrapper or the title wrapper disappears and then reveals this form. So let us do that now. So initially what we want to hide is the input wrapper. So let us bring the hide class over to the input wrapper. Okay, and then now we can add an event listener on the change button. So let us select the change button, the change featured post button in our JavaScript. Now since this JavaScript is going to be specific only to the manage post index page, I'm going to write the JavaScript for that just under the page. So we're not going to write it inside the generic admin.js. So we'll provide a script tag, and then let's add a comment to represent our featured posts, and then we'll select the change featured post button. So we'll say document.query selector, and we pass the selector. Be sure to add a dot before the name of the class. The next thing we need to select is the input wrapper. The class for that is input wrapper. And lastly, we also need to select the title wrapper. So let me copy that class, and then I replace it here, and I make sure I also rename the variable. Okay, so we are adding event listener to the button. We'll listen for the click events, and when the user clicks on this button, what we will do is basically toggle the hide class. So we're just going to say class list.toggle hide, and we will do the exact same thing on the title wrapper. Okay, so at the beginning only the input wrapper has the hide class. So as we are toggling it on the input wrapper, which means we are removing it, we are adding it to the title wrapper, which makes the title wrapper disappear, and then the input wrapper appears. Okay, let us refresh, and then we try this out, and it is working. So when we refresh, it goes back to the title wrapper, then clicking on the change button reveals the input wrapper. Alright, so this is it for this section. Catch you in the next one.